Hey guys, I've got some very exciting news. Scrabble Guess the ELO is officially back. In this video, we're going to be looking at a few games played between our two favorite opponents, Player 1 and Player 2, and trying to guess each of their skill levels. In this game, Player 1 will of course be first, and has this opening rack. I expect we'll see either Yeelin, Y-E-E-L-I-N, or Noily, N-O-I-L-Y, come down to double the Y. Yeelin would be my preferred play. Let's see what Player 1 does. They do indeed play Yeelin, so good start to the game. Player 2 will only have partial racks for, as Player 1 is annotating the game, so maybe a little bit tougher to get a precise handle on Player 2's skill level, but we'll do the best we can. Probably Thorny comes down, as it does, and let's see, Player 1 has Orometer through the E in Yeelin. A little bit of a tricky find. Let's see if they come up with it. They indeed do, so nice start to the game by Player 1. Player 2 is going to play Biog above Thorny for a decent score, and Player 1 has pulled 3 U's out of the bag. So it'll be interesting to see what Player 1 does here. It's easy, I think, to immediately just exchange, sort of out of frustration after drawing 3 U's, but there are definitely better plays here. It's most certainly worth it to play something like Unaus, U-N-A-U-S, and Orometers. That would score about 20 points and keep UD, so not ideal, but almost certainly better than exchanging here. So let's see what Player 1 does. They do indeed play Unaus, very good play there. That's exactly what I would have done. Player 2 is going to play Zap on the top left. So far we're seeing very good stuff, it seems, from both players. Player 1 has been playing, I think, optimally, and Player 2 seems to be doing quite well for their racks. Player 1 will be bingoing maybe Bursted and Yeelins. You could also do something like Outbreed from the second O in Orometers. I don't see anything from the I in Yeelin that would get to the triple word score. We'll also want to keep an eye on the top line throughout this game with Spit. That has just been opened up by Player 2's last play. Let's see what Player 1 comes up with here. They do play Bursted, which seems reasonable to me. They take a 90 or so point lead. Player 2 now struggling with vowels, plays Odia, which is a play I like a lot. You're down that much, you gotta open things up. Unfortunately for Player 2, Player 1 has pulled the other blank, and probably just something like Walk, W-A-U-K, to get rid of the W-U. Keeps EIM blank, looks extremely strong here. Let's see what Player 1 does. That's exactly what they do. So yeah, Player 1 I still think is playing basically optimally, if not optimally. Player 2 plays Hinky, scores pretty well. Not a great draw for Player 1. I don't think there are any bingos with that rack, so maybe, let's see, I guess Guy, G-I-E, and B-E under Bursted is probably reasonable. Or maybe something a little bit better than that, but that's the best I'm seeing immediately, and that's exactly what Player 1 does. Player 2 is going to play Juicer, it looks like. So that's an interesting play. On first blush, it doesn't look great because it blocks the line we were talking about with Spit. On the other hand, it does set up another good line with Juicers. What I don't love about it, though, is it tends to exhaust the board because it's pretty easy for Player 1 to just make a play over here to block, or even to maybe play down on column M, or excuse me, on column N, or across from this A. And the right-hand side of the board is just quickly going to run out of space. So I don't love what Juicer does to the board. At the same time, I don't know Player 2's rack, and based on what they had with the JIC, it very well may be that Juicer was the only reasonable play they had. So I don't want to jump to much of a judgment based on that. Player 1 is going to be bingoing with maybe Amidase, A-M-I-D-A-S-E, on column N. That looks very strong. It may even be something better, but Amidase looks really good. That should pretty much put the game away, and that's exactly what they play. So I believe Player 1 and I have agreed on every single play so far that they have made. So excellent game so far from Player 1. And this game is already pretty much over. Player 2, with all one-pointers, presumably has to settle for Tyne. Player 1 now probably just plays Fox on the top right, I would imagine. There we go. Fox comes down. Player 2 still struggling a bit, plays Wii, and yeah, Player 1 is now up 112 points, so probably wants to just get rid of this Q. I'd just play something like Cade or Kadi through the I and Yeelins to take out that line. Actually, no, I wouldn't do that because you have, I just realized you have Cot available over here, making Cot both ways, Ami and Tin. That scores a lot of points. So that's probably what player 1 should do, and that's exactly what they do. Player 2 will bingo here, it seems. Yes, they will. They have Apesias through the I in Yelens, and that's exactly what they play. So nice find there by player 2. Not the easiest word to see, so I think that does validate that player 2 is still a very strong player, that they were able to, even despite being pretty much out of the game, able to find that bingo and cut some spread. So nice play there by player 2. And yeah, there are now 5 tiles in the bag. They're all pretty ugly. The unseen tiles to player 1 are AAGILLLNOOTV. So player 1 basically needs to just not open anything up here, and they should hold on to win this game quite easily. Something like Fed under guy looks fantastic here, scores well, unloads the F in one of the Ds. They play Dev instead, which is totally fine. Unloading the V, which is certainly an annoying tile to have in the endgame, as it doesn't make any 2 other words. And I think that's where the annotation actually ends here, guys, is I don't see any more turns for player 2. So I think we can assume here that player 1 went on to pretty routinely win this game in the ending. And yeah, I mean, player 1, I think, pretty much played perfectly. Like, I literally agreed with player 1 on every single play that they made. And hard to say for sure with player 2 without being able to see their racks. Again, I didn't love the board dynamics of Juicer, but it very well could have been their best play by such a large margin that it would have been correct. Apesias was a nice find at that stage of the game. It seems like player 1 just got the better of the tiles, but they both are very strong players. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to say that, I mean, player 1 is easily over 2,000 based on the way they played. Like I said, I can't say anywhere they made a mistake. So I'm going to say player 1 is rated 2050, and player 2 is rated... I'm going to give them a pretty strong rating because all of their plays seemed fairly solid, and there tend to not be huge rating differences between the players. So I'm going to say player 2 is also a top player. I'm going to say 2050 for player 1 and 2000 for player 2. Let's see. Okay. Wow. So I got player 1 right on the nose. Player 1 is exactly 2050. Player 2 is slightly weaker, rated about 1900, but still a pretty good guess. And as I mentioned, it's hard to know for sure with player 2 having not had their full racks. I certainly was correct that they're still a very strong player, but not quite on the level of player 1. So very, very well played game by both players, it seems. Just player 1 got the better end of the tiles and was able to put them to very good use. But that's pretty cool. I literally got player 1's rating exact to the number. Okay, and now we move on to game number 2. Player 1 is once again first, and it looks like this time player 2 will be the player annotating the game, as we only have 3 tiles for player 1. They're going to be opening with Nav or Van, I would assume. They play Van for 12. Player 2 has Veridity from the V. Wow. Bingo with 3 I's and a Y to start off the game. Do they find it? No! Oh, no. Okay, so a disastrous mistake to start things off for player 2, playing Ivy for just 14 points, saving IIDRT instead of, once again, the amazing bingo of Viridity, VIRIDITY, would have been available from this V for about 65 points, and getting rid of all 3 I's and the Y at the same time. So, a very unfortunate missed opportunity there for player 2. But it's certainly easy when you have a rack like this to just assume that there's nothing in that you're going to have to either exchange or just dump off a few tiles. So it's an easy one to miss, but at the same time, it is something I would expect a top player to see, especially with the common ITY suffix. So I'm already getting the sense here that player 2 is probably not quite a top player. But okay, let's keep going. Player 1 has JO. They'll probably be playing JO and OI. Is my guess. There's also Jivey and Joe. Either one seems reasonable. They play Joe over here. And yeah, player 2 now paying for their mistake, drawing another I as well as the Q. I expect fully we'll see an exchange here. There's nowhere to play QI. There's absolutely nothing worth playing. You should probably exchange 4 or 5 here. I'd keep something like dr maybe. Yeah, they keep RT, perfectly reasonable. Most important there is just to exchange, get rid of the Q, get rid of those I's. Player 1 now playing MM. I like that a lot strategically, just keeping it tight. You know, you have a little bit of a lead. Player 2 just exchange. No reason to give them anything to work with. Ugly draw for player 2. Exchanging QIII, drawing GUUW. This is just ugly, and you could actually consider exchanging again, trading WUUG. I mean, what else are you going to do? You definitely don't want to keep UW. I guess Guru and Vang is probably worth it. It still scores 15 points. It keeps TEW. That's the best I see. Okay, so player 2 plays Rung through the N and Van, keeps UTE. That's okay, also. I think, yeah, Rung and Guru are both probably reasonable. I think I would have gone with Guru personally, but I don't hate this play. Either way, very ugly rack. Player 1 plays Earn. Player 2 finally with a good rack is, I believe, going to play Thunders through that N, and indeed they do. So if player 2 finally, after quite a roller coaster of a few first turns, does draw a bingo, player 1 plays F. Wow, very aggressive play by player 1. Look at this, guys. Player 1 plays F under the D and the E of Thunders. So that makes me think maybe player 1 has an X or something like that and is trying to set it up. So this is either a very aggressive play, I feel like, to the point of almost being reckless, or an extremely smart play trying to set up an X or other big tile that player 1 has there. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And if I'm player 2, after seeing a play like that, I'm definitely on heightened alert, and I'm probably going to sacrifice some points to block that spot. Like, normally, if not for that play, I'd probably be doing something like Airy up here, A-E-R-I-E, to score well and shed my vowels. I would actually consider playing Airy down here. It's not that big a point sacrifice. Up top is 23 points. On the bottom is 20 points, but I'm really worried now my opponent has the X or maybe a big play ending in a Y there, and I want to sacrifice to block that. So let's see what player 2 does. They play OE there, which I don't hate. I still like it better than playing up top, since you do at least block most 5-letter words on the 14th row. The problem is it doesn't, of course, block shorter plays with the X over here. That being said, OE does still have much better equity. AEIRS is a super strong leave, especially with the potential of hitting D-column bingo ending in sum. So I don't hate that at all. I probably still would have gone Airy after EF, but I don't think playing OE is unreasonable at all. Player 1 plays Z over here. That's a pretty bizarre play, because it would have been available with EW for several more points, right? Because Z over here scores 23. If it had been played with EW and ER, putting the Z on the double letter, that scores 29. And I mean, Z does open another bingo line on the right, but player one is down, but they're barely down. They don't need to be sacrificing points to open bingo lines like this and give so much back to the opponent. So this is, I feel like, a pretty significant mistake, and I think it maybe shows a little bit of strategical weakness by player 1. I see a lot of weaker players sometimes, if they're even down a little bit, they'll start panicking and sacrificing a lot to open bingo lines, which, unless you're down a lot of points, like we're talking 80, 100 points at this stage of the game at least, you shouldn't be doing that. So I think this is a pretty sizable mistake, and that definitely makes me think player 1 is not quite a top player either. Okay, player 2 probably going to play Zaire from the Z, I would guess. They play Airy. That's totally fine as well for 24 points. It keeps IS. I would have probably been aggressive there personally and played Zaire, just because you do have an S, and Zaire sets up the S hook very nicely on the right-hand side of the board here, hooking Zaires. I think there are still a couple S's unseen, but given that you have one in hand, it's reasonable to be aggressive there. So I probably would have gone with Zaire. That being said, I don't mind the more cautious approach of Airy either. Player 1 does now have a bingo, so Regnant and Ewer looks really good. That's going to be almost 90 points, if not actually probably is 90 points on a double-double. And, ooh, another miss here. Okay, so player 1 plays Antigen on the bottom, but Regnant, making the blank an R, with Ewer would have played here on the double-double. And let's do the math exactly. That would have been 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 28, 78, 81... 12. That would have been 93 points, guys. So a pretty big miss from player 1, playing anti-gen for only 73 instead of the 93-point Regnant. And this is interesting, too. So going back to that EF turn we were looking at earlier, we now know that player 1 didn't actually have an X or really any high point tiles that went there. So pretty reckless play, if you ask me, for player 1 to play that for just one more point than playing FE in the same spot earlier and not giving back that spot. So like, let me just show you guys what I mean, right? If we go back to that EF turn, player 1, instead of EF there, could have just played FE one spot over with F and RE. One less point and doesn't give back this massive hotspot with an X or a Y or something like that. And now we know, based on the next 2 plays, that player 1 didn't have any tiles they were setting up. The ZU doesn't go there. None of these other tiles really score all that many points. So I think we're seeing a lot of imprecisions this game from both players. But okay, so player 2 probably doesn't have a bingo here. I don't see one. Should be able to score a decent number of points. Maybe something like drive on the bottom left. Let's see what they come up with. Yep, drive. That seems reasonable to me. Pretty tight game. Player 1 is going to play poo over here. Probably reasonable. Player 2, Aqua's on the bottom right is going to be 74 points. So I assume player 2 is going to find that, and they do. Nicely done. So player 2 now taking a commanding lead. Player 1 playing ID over here for 12. So player 1 is now probably close to a bingo. And if I were player 2, I would immediately block this line on the O column because it's easy to hit and it scores a lot of points if player 1 can bingo ending to this S on the triple. So I would immediately slap down something like YO over here, score 22 points, keep a good leave, and block that line. And that's exactly what player 2 does. But player 1 still going to hit sacking on the D column for 86. So getting back in the game briefly because player 2 draws the blank and will certainly be bingoing here. Maybe something like Anal Sight from the A that scores 86. Looks really strong to me. Don't see anything better. And Anal Sight is exactly what comes down. So nicely done by player 2. And can player 1 come up with a last gasp here to get back in this game? Healy looks like a great play. You got to start opening more lanes given your deficit. Player 2, nice draws. Probably going to just play Fax on the top right up here. I would imagine blocking the board a bit, scoring over 40 points. That's exactly what comes down. So player 2 really now in full command of this game. Player 1 is going to get down Zuid to dump some vowels and score points. Player 2, though, completely in the driver's seat. Just needs to be a little bit careful with only 3 in the bag. Player 2 does have bellhops, though, through this H and Healy, which, of course, just ends the game on the spot. So let's see if they find it. No! Okay, player 2 plays pose, and this is a dangerous play because that empties the bag. Like, let's look back at this pool. So from player 2's perspective, there's these white tiles, A, B, E, I, L, R, T, 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 W. So after pose, it's dangerous because Librate would have bingoed out on the L column, right? So after pose, if player 1 had Librate, which they were close to, if that W was an A, then Librate would have played right here. That's a lot of points. 1274. That's 78. That would have won because that would have put player 1 to 427, and player 1 would have easily gotten more than 11 points from player 2's rack, given that player 2 would have the W. So pose is a actually very big mistake by player 2. Not only missing bellhops, but if you're going to miss bellhops, which is reasonable, then you've got to at least not empty the bag, preferably, or probably if you play Zuids and Slope, that scores enough to just outrun anything player 1 may have, but I'm not even sure about that, because if you draw the W, then you might still be in trouble. Like, if you're not going to bingo here, you got to just not empty the bag. Just play, like, I mean, you could even play off the B and the L and save Slope or something. There's a million things you can do. Just play POS or BOS, and it's really hard to imagine losing. So a really careless play there by player 2. They got away with it, because player 1 didn't end up having any playable bingos after pose. All they could do was play blue and SE. Wow. This game never ceases to amaze. Player 2 lets a phony 2 go now in the endgame all of a sudden. I mean, it's going to be a moot point as far as the outcome of the game goes, but still, come on, man. You got to see that and challenge it off. Spread still matters. And player 1 now goes out with dirt. So, wild game here, guys. A lot to unpack. So, yeah, we got to go back to the beginning and summarize all the mistakes. So it started off with player 2 opening with this miss of Veridity on their opening rack, right? That was the biggest clue to start off the game. Player 2 missed Veridity, and then later on in the game, too, we had a lot of issues. We had, especially this EF play by player 1 was extremely weird strategically. Also, this play of Z seemed like a clear mistake. Anti-gen, a very big mistake over Regnant. And there were still a lot more inaccuracies towards the end of the game. Player 2 does find Analyte here, which is a good play, but in the end game, this play of pose is just so bad. I mean, missing bellhops is understandable, right? You're not really thinking of bingoing, especially through an H. Ironically, though, if you alphabetize this rack, it actually spells bell ops out. So if player 2 were to have alphabetized their rack, they probably would find bellhops pretty easily, which is kind of ironic. But in any case, missing bellhops is understandable, but you gotta just not empty the bag here. I mean, it doesn't take someone, I don't think, at a super high level to realize that even if you don't bingo here, you gotta just leave one in the bag so that if your opponent bingos, you have another play and can win in the end game. So, I don't know. This is actually, to me, one of the most telling plays of the game. I think so. Player 2's biggest mistakes by far were missing Veridity and this play of pose. These are both egregious mistakes. Player 1 missing Regnant on the anti-gen turn is a pretty egregious mistake. EF and ZEE were just both bizarre plays strategically. So both players making some sizable mistakes this game. Oh, and then of course too at the end, how could I forget? There was the phony 2 of SE. So, which player 1 played and player 2 didn't even notice. So I don't want to put too much stock in that once again here in this position because the game was already over and maybe the players were just feeling a little bit careless. But yeah, I don't even know what to say here, guys. I mean, I have a hard time believing either of these players are rated over like 1750. I would be shocked if either of them are rated over 1800. So I'm going to say, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, yeah, missing Veridity is definitely understandable. Pose is just such a strategical gaffe, though, at that point in the game. And, yeah, I mean, the plays by player 1, anti-gen was, I mean, that's a really high prop bingo of Regnant in a spot that's not too hard to see. I don't know, guys. I'm going to say player 2 is rated like, I think they're both rated in the high 1600s. I mean, maybe that's a little too low because Analyte, it's very high prob though, Analyte. I mean, it's not that hard to see. Yeah, I'm going to say both players are rated about 1680. I think they both made some pretty sizable mistakes. And I feel like, because yeah, for player 2, I just feel like missing Veridity is understandable and bellhops, but I just don't think a player with enough skill and experience to be rated over 1700 would play pose. And for player 1, I don't think most players over 1700 would miss Regnant and play EF and Z. So yeah, I'm going to say like 1670, 1680 for both players. Let's see. Okay, so very good guess. Player 2 is rated 1615. Player 1 is rated 1550. So I actually even overestimated the skill level of these players. I said about 1670, 1680 for both of them. So not a bad guess, but a little bit too high, if anything. Like I said, these players both made a bunch of fine plays in this game. Analyte was a good find, and there were a bunch of decent plays like Zuid and Aquas throughout, but there were just enough egregious mistakes strategically that I felt like these players couldn't be super strong. So generally pretty good guesses here. Like I said, I had guessed high 1600s for both players. It's low 16s for player 2 and mid 15s for player 1. So yeah, I think we'll stop at this one, guys, since this game had a lot of content and took a little while, so we'll leave it as 2 games this episode. But hope you guys enjoyed the video and maybe got something out of it. And yeah, like I said, now that Guess the ELO has been relaunched, I expect to be making a lot more videos of it soon. So if you're enjoying these, definitely let me know, and I will keep them coming. Thanks again for watching, guys, and have a good one. Bye-bye.